Hi, welcome to the returning episode of Talk is Deep, Quarantine Edition. Before we start, we'd like to give a sincere and serious acknowledgement of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Black Americans who have been victims of police brutality and racial injustice. We hear you, we stand with you, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about how, as Asians, we can be allies to the Black community.
Yay. Okay, so have you guys been kind of like talking to your parents about like the Black Lives Matter movement and all the protests that's been going on? Because I know I've been having like kind of like heated arguments or like conversation with my parents or just like older relatives in general, and like they do not go well, like at all.
I think they like acknowledge what Black Lives Matter is, but maybe they don't grasp the concept as we do. Some common things that I hear in my household are like, why can't everything be peaceful? Why is it like after they've already arrested the cop who took that horrendous action against George Floyd, like if he's already arrested, why is this movement still going on? And why are protests going on? Is that like similar to like what you guys hear too?
Yeah,
a lot of it.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, a lot of it is my parents and all the other adults in my family, they only understand it at a surface level. They don't comprehend the deeper history and the fact that these series of events have been they've all been led up. It's all been built up to this, and that's why there's such an explosion of all these riots and protests that's happening. They don't understand that. They only take it as it is now because they just don't comprehend it at all, and that's where the argument starts.
Do you think that's because like our parents are like immigrants, so like they don't understand like the history of America fully, or like the full context when they came here?
I think that, and also like they're like, I feel like they compare their experience to Black people's experience, because obviously we know that like our parents came from nothing, like they were refugees from like the war, and like they came here with nothing, and they kind of like built up their wealth and like everything just so they can be comfortable and that we can be comfortable. And then they see their success and like see their success story and say, if we made it, then how come they didn't like make it? So I think the mindset that they have towards that is what's keeping them from like thinking about the fact that like systematic repression affects Black people, because when they really think about it, like the civil rights movement only happened like 60 years ago, and not a lot has changed, and people have still like, there's still segregation, there's still a lot of like unfairness that are obviously, and like violence that are happening like to the Black community. And like I think they don't see the bigger picture, like Kevin said. They only see like the scope of what matters to them, which is like their family and their children, and like they don't really think about like the bigger picture.
I think like something that really opened my eyes is I had a conversation with an African American professor of mine. She has a doctorate, which is beyond amazing, and she mentioned to me like, as an African American, she got her doctorate, her family lives middle class, they follow the rules and everything. But to this day, every day, she still is concerned with her son's actions. Even though he does something harmless, like play with water guns, she's still scared just of her kids just playing like that, or like wearing a certain like article of clothing that people may not understand. And she's still scared, like no matter what, just because of her race too. And I think that's like something a lot of Asian Americans don't understand. Like if we see a police officer, we don't fear for our lives, or most of us just do not fear for our lives. And that's just not the case for like the Black community. And I think that's something like, even if you make it, you're successful, you follow the rules, like for the African American community, they still like have like fear too. And they're not as like respected as you would think with all the success that they have.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's always
But
kind of like been racism within like the Asian community, like against Black people. Like it's it sort of sucks, but it's also like they've never grown up around Black people. They don't go to school with them, or like they don't learn the history. I feel like it's very like superficial on like the level that they see people like Black people as being portrayed on the media, and like seeing all these protests, and like my parents are like, oh, if they're protesting for their rights, then why are they looting? Why are they like burning down their communities? They're being lazy or stuff like that, and just like having all these labels. And I don't know, it's a really like shallow way of them thinking about it. And even if I argue against them about it, it's kind of like arguing with like a brick wall. Sorry, Peter, I cut
yeah,
you
I
off.
think like no worries. I think we were something like that. Like I've had these. I think it really helps to like show what's actually going on. It's like a lot of times like Asian parents just like see whatever's on the news as like SBTN or like Fox or whatever they watch, and like even stuff like CNN and like MSNBC. They don't show like like all the craziness that's happened in the past week. Like when I talked to my dad about this, like I showed him like videos on Twitter, like people like people's live streams and stuff, like police like beating them for like no reason. And like I think like once they like see it, like at least for my dad, when he saw it, it began to like start to click for him. And he was very able to like recognize that this is a problem, like this is why people are so mad.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, sorry, Kevin.
Oh yeah, no, no, exactly like what Peter said. Like seeing is believing for a lot of our older parents, because the news is not the most optimal and not the most honest way to get your sources. Like imagine if our parents used Twitter, they would be so woke about. They would be so much more in touch with the modern day community and how modern, like how actual people are like minded like them. Because my parents, or sorry, my mom is just very limited to the amount of people that she meets. Like her perspective and her opinion on Black people are just, again, like at surface, because she's only meet a small margin of Black people every day at her nail shop, so she's not aware. Like she can't comprehend that there are different types of Black people out there. From they're not all like the type that she sees, who are more on the ghetto side of the spectrum. There, so.
But does she not like think about like, oh, like these are, like those people are like her customers, those are the people who bring business to like her nail shop, and like despite like whoever they are, they're the ones who are like supporting them? Because I feel like Peter brought it up a while ago, how like Asian parents, or like a lot of like older Asian generation forget that like the reason why they're here is because like Black people fought for like against oppression like long ago, so that Asian Americans can be in the state and were able to become citizens and have our own businesses and like have jobs, because it was like pretty like it was illegal for like Chinese Americans to like work on the railroad, or like like be workers back then.
Yeah, I think she does. She kind of just views them as like clients and like nothing more. Oftentimes, she views a lot of them as troublemakers, just because that's the experience that she's had. So she's more about just worrying about her own, like protecting her own kind, and like only investing in the struggles of only Asian people, and that's where her focus is at. So she doesn't feel, I guess, obligated to invest herself in like the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
Those are our parents' ways. Yeah.
I think like as much as we try to like change the mindset of our parents, what's ingrained in them is like not going to be it's not going to be passed on onto us as long as we stay educated. Because it's like I feel like a lot of times, like even if I show my parents like the things that I see on Twitter, like I talked to them about today where where they were like, oh, like how corrupt the police system is, and saying how they are so overfunded that like public education and like all these other stuff that is supposed to be for the public isn't getting funded. And they're like, oh well, what is a world without like police, like police like maintaining order? And I'm like, the thing is they're not doing it. Like they're supposed to be protecting citizens, and basically like throwing all these like different evidence at them, but they would still kind of like refuse to understand, or for some reason refuse to like believe the things that I say or like the stuff that they see. And like my dad was talking about like how like, oh, it's a war between like for the government, it's a war between like the Democrats and the Republicans. And I'm like, I just feel like they can't understand that like it's not a war between, it's a war for human rights, like, and like it's a class war, and like we're trying to just like, people are protesting to like have better lives, to make the future better. And I feel like they can't understand that. So like, I don't know, for me, it, at the end of the day, like I can argue with my parents like as much as I want, but as long as I ingrain these ideals and like of like being able to treat someone like as a human being to my child, then I'm okay with that. Because like besides our parents, there's so many other people that, you know, you can connect to and educate, you know, like within the Asian community.
I think that's the great thing about like our generation, because I think you see like a surge of our generation being more involved, because I know it might be like a model minority thing, like where we just like stay quiet. Like I was always taught like stay quiet, stay out of trouble, don't involve yourself in anything, like focus on yourself. But I feel like lately, especially when you go on social media, you see a lot of Asian people speaking out about these issues, informing others and having those tough conversations with your parents, because like, I don't know, it's very hard to have them, and you have to have a shit ton of patience to have it, because like their minds aren't going to be changed within a day, like honestly, or they might not even change at all. But just having a conversation with someone that like disagrees with you and sharing what you know is pretty powerful. And I like appreciate the Asian American community for like speaking out about that too.
Especially sometimes when there's a language barrier too, and it's hard to articulate your points at the most optimal way, because there's just certain degrees where you can't paint the imagery in their head. You can't describe to them the most like significant way, you know, to paint their picture in their head about it, because you're just so limited by your language barrier.
Right, like, and it just like, it sucks because I'm like, my Vietnamese is at a second grade level, and I'm arguing with my parents, and it's like, how am I supposed to win against their argument when I'm arguing in a language that I barely know, and I can't articulate myself? So it's just like, it raises my blood pressure every time.
Yes.
And it's like, I was in the middle of eating dinner, and my mom had to bring up the protest. I'm like, it could be before, it could be after, it could be any other time. and she would just bring it up. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go.
That's how they get you, man. That's how they get you. When they cook for you, and then you're like, gotcha, bitch. We're not talking about this. Agree with me.
Right. Yeah. But it's hard. And it's like, I don't know. And I feel like sometimes our parents don't understand that they sent us to school and we received a lot of education, and like we understand the history of, you know, of like everything that's happening in the country, and we follow news and we are educated. Isn't that what they wanted us when they came here to build a better future for us? So it's like kind of ironic that we're trying to tell them like, oh, what's like the right thing that we're trying to achieve, and they kind of like shut us down.
Yeah, it's like, you did this. You paid for this. You made me do this. Why are you mad?
Although, Peter, as you know, there are some people in our, I guess, family connections that went to college and still have a very narrow-minded perspective on the subject matter. As you,
diverse school.
Drop their ass.
I can't even say it because she might watch this podcast. But it's kind of crazy to me how there are educated people in this world. People, especially if you go to like Fairfax, like you live in Fairfax, where there's diversity everywhere, and you go to school with people of all different types of backgrounds, and you're still not able to comprehend your fellow man's struggle, or you can't even acknowledge that there is a certain prejudice against certain individuals that that you encounter, that you work with. It baffles me that there are people like that.
I feel like it's not just about education, because like you can be going to school, like college in like, I don't know, North Dakota and like
Alabama
and like literally, like I think before like we started recording, like Peter talked about like us staying in a bubble, and if you kind of like, even if you are educated and you stay in a bubble like your whole entire life and not interact with like other people and seeing how they live, like I think about like how privileged we are. Like I don't even know what it's like growing up in like the ghettos, or like growing up with like and going to school where you don't have enough books. Like I cannot relate to any of that, and I will never understand that. So like if there's people who are educated and they're like being surrounded by other people who are like-minded, how can they understand other people's hardships?
Yeah,
I mean,
like
Chris. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Peter, go.
It's like when you it's like when everyone you grow up with has had like a like 3-bedroom house, like 2 working parents, and like loving mother, father, and like college paid for, all that shebang, and you go and walk up to someone who doesn't have all that and say like, hey, why don't you just like work harder like me? It's like they just don't get that there's basically like another America that like most people don't see, and it's hard for people to like really break outside of that bubble without like really putting themselves out there and like having those difficult conversations with their friends or like people in the community. Like for me, I think one of the
Peter,
go ahead. Sorry.
I thought Kevin had something for a moment, but he just stopped like with it. Never mind.
I was like, never mind. Hope no one heard that.
No, Uber driver.
Yeah, I was gonna say like one of the most eye-opening things for me was like I think 2 years ago, like I was riding home from like some 4th of July like party in Richmond, and I had a nice conversation with my driver, and like I before I didn't know like anything about what it's like to like actually live in Richmond, like as a student of like VCU and stuff, like you live there but you don't like really live there. Like your parents pay your rent, like you live within like a mile radius around campus, like all your friends go to VCU or like have been to VCU, so it was really interesting for me to talk to someone who's like lived in VCU or Richmond for like 10, 20 years and like talk about how when she came here, like it was a completely different city, and now like cities changed so much. Like they're closing down bus stops that low-income people, specifically Black people, use to like get to their jobs, and how like rent's been increasing because landlords realize they can charge like ridiculous rent to like college students who would pay anything for like a shitty like cardboard box in like the park. And so people in her family was looking to like move to like somewhere cheaper just to make ends meet, and how she had to like work a regular job as well as like Uber just to like try to pay the bills. And it was just really eye-opening. Wow. Since you never think about these things.
speaking of eye-opening, like Peter's right. It's all about experience and getting to know real life people that you don't normally like out of your circle of friends. You know, like actual people in the community. Like when Chris, made us go to Carver, volunteered us to go to Carver. We got to see. I mean, I personally got to see a whole new world of, I guess, I don't know if that's the correct word to say, but it's like underprivileged kids who have poor funding for their school and education. And like my whole life, I've never seen that until I went to Carver, and it really just opened a new perspective that this isn't like society's not perfect. There's an underbelly here of like mistreated or not as valued communities or public places like that. Yeah, privilege. There you go. Privileged people like that.
Yeah, I think like that kind of stuff is definitely eye-opening because we all went to Fairfax County Public Schools, and I always had textbooks. We had like multiple computers. We got our AP tests paid for, and like we never thought any of it. But when you go to a school and you see like their infrastructure is basically crumbling, they barely have enough books, and they barely have like enough supplies for their kids. That's when it like really clicks to you. And I think the phrase you never really know someone unless you walk a mile in their shoes is very prevalent because we may not like understand like how someone is unless we see it firsthand, like you guys have been saying too.
Yeah, and what's crazy to me is like I think we talked about this briefly before, but like most of the people at that school were like black. Like when we came in to volunteer, like the kids are like, "Whoa!" It's like they'd never seen that many Asian people. Like it was.
It's experiences for both sides, man. It's wild for both sides to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like so weird because it's like, why hasn't like anyone ever come like before to like help or like talk? Why is this like the first time that you've ever like met someone like us? Raises a lot of questions.
And it's also insane to think about the amount of privilege that we have too, because like for us, we always thought about like going to college, but when you realize like they probably like don't even know or like at that young of an age, like they probably don't even know like what college is or like or like they have their hopes and dreams, but like they are in their own bubble too, like as much as like we were in our own bubble when we went to the school that we did. Like they have their hopes and dreams, but they like don't even know if they're able to like accomplish it, which is like a different point of view from us. It's insane.
Which is crazy because it's like literally less than a mile from like VCU campus.
Right. And that's another way that Asians can be allies, like to the Black community. We volunteer our time and services and, get to know these kids, actually, pay to educate them, to be a mentor to them. Like that's a small and impactful way to, to establish a connection with the Black community.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to like listen to these stories and like listen to these struggles and problems, and just to let them feel like they're heard, as well as to better inform ourselves to help.
Mm-hmm.
So since we're on like the topic of taking action, what like throughout the weeks, what have you guys been doing to support the movement, and how do you guys think that other people can support the movement and be an ally?
Donate to whatever like funds that they have. I donated to like the Richmond Bail Fund, and just like look at like different books or like different readings and resources where you can kind of like learn about Black history, or like I like to look at Humans of New York. Sometimes they highlight like the different, not even just like everybody else's lives out there, and you can kind of like understand and empathize with people whose lives are completely different from yours. And lately they've done like some like stories about like the Black community, and just like stay educated, try to like sign petitions, look at Twitter, like keep up with what's going on, and try to like call out people if you see anyone being racist. I haven't seen anything like that, but yeah, just like do like your part. Like you don't have, even if you don't donate, like sign petition, just like speak up for other people. Yeah, anything else?
Now, I don't want to brag and I don't want praise for this, but just try to hold it in. But I uploaded a black square on Instagram. Yeah, I know that shit made a huge difference to the cause.
Wow.
I know, right?
A revolutionary.
Well, try to hold my activist award, please, because aside from that, after finding out that it was a performative activism attempt, but prior to that too, I, again, like most people, I donate to the causes that I think are very helpful towards the movement, to memorial funds of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, just signing petitions and texting, making your voice heard, all those things to make your voice stronger. That's what I've contributed. I hope to someday be able to protest, to physically be there to show my commitment to it. But you don't need to protest to do it. You can support by other means, like we've all done.
Yeah, I think it's important to like do what you can. Like, not everyone's like brave enough to go there and get tear gas like
in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah,
unacceptable. We shouldn't have to do this.
It's my bucket list.
Yeah, but it's like watching some people, like my friends, like stories, like at the Richmond protest, for example, where like the police used tear gas and like ran up and pepper sprayed people. It's like crazy down there, and so I think just like trying to figure out what you can do, like where it's staying educated, being vocal about it, donating where you can, or being more involved in like organizing, is anything helps.
Yeah, I've seen like
voting.
I mean, if you guys are not happy with the way our government is right now, y'all should vote.
Are we all registered, everybody? Are we all registered? Yay.
Yes, sir.
And so you watching, you should be registered too. Takes like 15 minutes, then it makes a huge difference after that. So get out there and do your civic duty.
Yeah. And pay attention to like your local news too.
Yeah, pay attention to like everything that's going on. And like I feel like people, like another thing, like people shouldn't feel pressured to do everything. Like just do what you can. Like even if you don't have money to donate, like maybe you can like collect like donations from other people, like water bottles or like masks or like gloves, and like give it to people who are protesting if you are not protesting, or like if you're not participating, then like donate to like bail people out. And like just don't, I feel like people shouldn't feel pressure to like participate in like a movement, because I feel like if you're faking it to be like part of like a movement, then it's not genuine, and like we're not trying to like, I don't know, it doesn't add anything to the cause.
Yeah, it's kind of like,
what do you think about the argument where there's two sides of the spectrum? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Peter?
I was just gonna say like, don't just like post on like make one post on social media, like pat yourself on the back like some influencers who will not be named. But like actually, like I'd say like try to listen. I don't know how to think like this.
tag your 10 friends on IG to support your Black Lives Matter movement, as if that was gonna do anything.
Want me to draw an orange too?
Okay, Peter, shut the fuck up. That was a great ass challenge. My orange was fucking amazing.
I think that's something that I've been trying to do is because like we're Asian Americans and we may not. Well, there's like no way we can understand like what these Black people are going through at all because we're fucking Asian. So like trying to reach out to like your Black friends, like seeing like it's true, but like I've been trying to reach out to like my Black friends and my Black professors and everybody, and trying to like have conversations with them to see like, hey, how can we best support you? How can we best inform? And like I want to know your point of view from someone who's being like affected by this too. I think that's like another way to like see like a different point of view from instead of just like seeing what's on social media, just having like those personal conversations. So that's like make a difference.
Real quick, touching back on the subject where An said you shouldn't feel pressured or you shouldn't pressure others, you know, there is a lot of controversy with that because a lot of people kind of shame others for not speaking up at this moment, even though you might not know someone might be helping out in silence. They don't always have to post their stuff on social media. But there seems to be this kind of negative stigma that if you're not speaking out right now, then you're a part of the problem. As in, when I say speak out, I mean if you're not publicly putting it on your social media or whatever, then you're part of the problem. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's a hard position to be in because I think everyone feels some type of way with it, but at the same time, you don't know what these people are going through. Maybe they work for an employer that could easily just fire them for just speaking out. And of course, like, that's not an employer I personally would be wanting to work out with, but like, if these people need the money, like, they may be reluctant to speak out, but maybe they are like donating to a cause and just not telling anybody. So I think small things like that people should take into consideration too. Or maybe they don't want to speak out because they don't want to talk on like ignorance or like they don't want to misinform anybody. So
right, there you go.
Yeah, like if you look on my like Instagram, like Twitter, you wouldn't see anything about this except for like maybe like salty comments to certain individuals, or like Twitter fights, that sort of stuff. But yeah, like there are many ways to like be involved, and I think like social media is like obviously like one of the easiest and accessible, but you know, not everybody has to like wear like a giant flag and banner and like say, hey guys, I'm involved.
Right.
You know, real G's move in silence.
Like, I feel like when you pressure, like when you create like such a pressure on like wanting everybody to speak out, it creates like just like you said, like performative activism. Like people are just gonna like post a picture and then call it a day, like, oh, I participated in this, like I'm good, like mark me out. And like that just, I don't know, it, like in my head it doesn't help to kind of like speak for others and like forcing you what you want them to do onto them. It, like what if in any case you keep on convincing someone, they're like, you know what, I'm not gonna do it, or like I don't, like I hate this movement even more now that you are pressuring me to do it. So like I just think if you are participating, if you are voicing your opinion, speak to others who are like-minded like you, or someone who is curious, or they want to learn more, or they seem like they're not as informed but they want to help, then speak to those. Don't waste your time on people who are not, you know, like open-minded or want to participate in the discussion.
Or if you
if you do,
go ahead, Peter.
Chris, you go.
I was gonna say, like, if people like do disagree with you and they're not being like super hostile, I think it's okay to have a conversation with them, but make sure it's like you respect what they're saying, but at the same time you should like say what you're saying. But if they're being like blatantly racist, you should like call them out on it. You know, I think a lot of people may be like misinformed, or they may have a different point of view. So I think sharing opinions as to like why someone thinks the way they do is helpful. But at the end of the day, they have to make the decision if they want to change their mind or not on like a certain viewpoint that they have.
Yeah, like one thing like I really hate is like, people doing like drive by like, hey, you should support BLM, and like I know that you're blah blah blah, but you should I don't know, like if you're going to try to like have these tough conversations with people, I think that you should really like commit to it and like really focus on, I don't know how to put this, like put effort in. Like I've seen people like DM like 1,000 people on their Instagrams or something, like, and it's like, here, can you sign this petition? It's like, sure, like I'll sign it, but this isn't really like raising awareness. This isn't like increasing people's knowledge of like the inequality in this country or anything. This is just like a very low effort, like sign this petition, get your name on, and pat yourself on the back sort of deal,
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're gonna like try to like do something like that, make sure that what you're doing helps, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What do you guys think about the argument where there are some Asians who aren't exactly on board with the Black Lives Matter movement, because when the coronavirus broke out, the pandemic broke out, they're left feeling angry and resentment because most Asians were under attack and assaulted by blacks and whites, and no one came to like the Asians people rescue. So there are some Asians who are hesitant or reserved on making their vocal about the Black Lives Matter because they're just so filled with like anger or jealousy, or they feel like the black community hasn't done enough for them.
Well, it's like, why would they help you if you never help them?
That's right.
Like, I think Asian Americans in particular are like really bad at activism or being vocal about it. I think that like there's a common, I'm not sure, like misconception, more like a image that like Asian Americans like are involved with like politics, or like they follow the mob minority myth where they just like keep quiet and like follow like whatever the authority is. So I think I can see why like some Asians would feel frustrated by like uh, black community not supporting Asian. We treat other people like whether or not we should be decent human beings and support everyone unconditionally.
Right on, right on. That should be a fortune cookie right there. That's good. That's
Yeah, I think like this movement is like there's so many different problems that's also rooted in it. I mean, like another thing that people are trying to fight is like systematic oppression, which is like when for generations like you are kind of like everybody in society has a role to play and they are supposed to play that role, and we want everybody to have the same rights, everybody have to have the same amount of justice and equity to like achieve the things that they want. So like I feel like this is not just a fight for, like when they say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean that only like Black Lives Matter, even though like, people argue like, oh, all lives matter. But it's like right now, like we're trying to highlight the brutality that's happening in the Black community, but we're also fighting for human rights and we're fighting for a better future for all minorities. So I feel like people should understand that this movement is like for everybody, like for our generation, for the younger people that are, going to grow up. And we don't want, police brutality to still be happening in our community. And we don't want, oppression and the unequal distribution of funds to affect like the future generations that are about to come. So like I feel like you should put aside your anger and hatred and think of the bigger picture. Like Peter said, you shouldn't let one like couple opinions of some people affect how you view the movement or how you view a group of people as a whole, because that's generalizing. And isn't that what everybody was doing to you when the coronavirus was happening? Chris, you have anything to add?
No, that's just mad facts.
Dead ass, preach.
Yeah, I mean, I
here's the
agree with
thing,
what
too.
everyone said. Like, we have to support the people that are being most affected right now. I mean, people fought for us during COVID. Now we have to go into, now we have to support those who are being affected and being harmed in the communities. So, yeah.
That's mad facts right there.
It was mad facts. And it's like, if we keep going with like an eye for an eye, or like we keep being like unsupportive, like it's gonna go nowhere. We always say like, why do these group of people support us? But like, you can just support them, and then they can support us back. So it can't be like a competition.
Move forward.
Yeah.
Well, here's another point too. Why a lot of the adults in my family, at least, the diners, they feel bad for the loss of lives of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, right? And so they understand why protesting is a thing, because they know that the peaceful protest didn't work, because, you know, at first people tried to peaceful protest and they were tear gas unnecessarily. We know that. So then the protests turned into riots, and then riots turned into looting. Now, we know that the looting isn't the Black Lives Matter movement's fault. There are undercover white supremacists and maybe undercover cops that are inciting the violence and looting. We know that, but the media doesn't show that. But our parents only watches news and media, so they have a very, again, surface level understanding of that. So a lot of them lose support for the Black Lives Matter movement because a lot of them have made a point to see that some of them are using this for personal gain, to take advantage of the situation to loot Target, or which is fine. I hate big corporations anyway. Loot the fuck out of big corporations. But a lot of small businesses are being affected. Small, innocent business owners are being affected. And while we know that they are not caused by the Black Lives Matter movement, it is, in fact, a thing that there are people taking advantage of this to cause more harm than good when it comes to destroying small businesses.
Right. I feel like, I don't know, it's a difficult situation to kind of like evaluate, because as long as there's protests going on, there's always going to be people who take advantage of those protests. And I feel like if I was protesting, all I have to try and do is to stay safe, like do it like the safest way as possible, as peaceful as possible. But I also see discussion on Twitter about how people talk about how riots worked in the past, you know, like it wasn't like the civil rights movement, the bill did not get passed because people were just peacefully protesting. They had to kind of like start rioting and start fighting for their voices to be heard. And like, we didn't see any changes being made until these protests kind of like recently got a little bit more violent. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that we should bring violence to these like protests or these riots in order to achieve our goals. But I don't know how to like answer directly like how to solve like the problems with like looters and stuff like that. But
I just wish that they wouldn't direct their anger at innocent small business owners who like
Right.
That's their livelihood. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing. If you want to, like, again, I don't like talk as deep as not condone any looting or rioting, but if they could just direct their anger towards big corporations who are maybe racist, maybe that's just a better way to like that'll be better for everyone in the long run, because those big corporations have insurance, they can cover it. We're ruining other innocent people's lives, and I don't think people genuinely want that. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a necessary evil, but it breaks my heart.
I mean, I think it's just hard because we don't know like who these people are that are mixed in with the crowd who are looting these small businesses, because we've seen clips of people who are like of protesters who are like trying to protect these small businesses and telling people to not cause any destruction, and like it's just hard to kind of root out who is responsible for all this violence, you know. And I feel like when we approach our parents about it, the best way is just to show them the evidence, show them that like educate them and tell them that it's not a cause and effect like kind of thing. Like there's gray areas where we just don't know who's doing all of this, but there's evidence that these protesters are not causing these lootings of these small businesses.
Another
right.
Peter,
go.
Okay. Well, like next time I'll use the Zoom raise my hand thing, just like class. But another way I like to look at it is that this is basically a manifestation of like 400 years of like pent up anger. Like these people have been protesting like since Ferguson and like LA in the 1990s, and like what it was the civil rights movement. And for a lot of people, it feels like nothing's really changing. Like when I was in Richmond last weekend, I was present for some of the first protests, and I saw that it was mostly peaceful. It's till I think like around midnight, a bunch of people started like climbing on top of like the pulse bus and like ended up setting it on fire. But and people are like, oh, like why would they do that? That's like crazy. But once you like understand some of the context around it, like Pulse is run by like GRTC, Richmond's like public transportation company, kind of like the DC Metro. And in recent years, like the Pulse GRTC has been focusing mostly on serving like VCU and its community. So like they've been cutting stops at like for low income families, Black communities, and as I mentioned before, and I can understand like why the Pulse would be like targeted as like a sign of anger. And when like the when you start like setting stuff on fire, like I can see how people get carried away, especially when like the police react with like tear gas and like running in with pepper spray, and like it just makes you more angry and amped up on top of like 400 years of like generational like oppression compounding into this very moment. So like even if the looting and violence you see on TV is like caused by like the protesters, even though like clear evidence that's like police agitators and like other like shenanigans going on, you have to understand that like a lot of people see peaceful protesting as like not working. Like the greasy wheel gets the oil, and one of the biggest and best ways like the Black community can get attention is by making the news for like looting stores and stuff, which is sad and terrible because they've basically been locked out of like the American like power system and like the system entirely. And so why would they participate in the system?
Mm-hmm.
I sorry for the rant.
No,
it
totally makes
puts
sense.
a new like perspective in my mind.
And I think it's like people are like, why can't they just remain peaceful? Like when Colin Kaepernick like took a knee and then he got like fired, like that was peaceful. And then they're like, burning does nothing. But then these people be like burning Nike shoes that they already bought against Nike when they like start supporting like Colin Kaepernick. I'm like, what are you doing? Like you're burning a shoe you already gave money. I don't understand. But
right, I think either way, like there's a message that needs to be, sent, And if the people who are protesting, the people who are fighting for their lives, if they're not being heard, there has to be a way to get people's attention, regardless of, you know, because it's like, what do they have to lose in regards to all of this? Their rights? Like, bitch, what rights, you know?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's like our fault as a society for not listening to them and not addressing like these problems, like generations of like inequality until now. Like, it's kind of like the kid who didn't do his essay until after it's due. He's next to like in front of the professor begging him for another 2-week extension, and then doesn't do it again, you know?
Well, I didn't expect to be attacked here on this fucking podcast today. I told you that in fucking confidence, sir. No, I'm kidding. I get it, you guys. But yeah. So where do we go from here, guys? Like, now that it almost seems like everything was returning to the norm, I see less and less posts every day. So what do we do? Do we continue to publicize and spread awareness until the end of time, or what is the casual person do?
I think just if you believe in the change and you want change, then just keep going. Like Chris said, like vote, like go out and vote, stay educated, you know, stay aware of everything that's going on. Try to donate if you can. There's still a lot of petitions out there that need signature, and there's still a lot of people out there who are protesting like every day that, you know, that you should support. And I feel like you don't have to publicly like announce that you are with the movement, but like just stay educated like with it, and like just keep doing what you want to do behind the scene is like the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, if you, like, you've seen, like, in the past weeks what's happened, and if you feel like you want to still spread awareness, do it. Do it because you truly believe it. Don't do it just because, like, you feel like, oh, if I post about this, I'll just be so woke. Like, no, like, post it because you truly believe in the movement. You truly believe what it stands
Twitter
for.
warriors.
Yeah, and
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and then come time vote in like your local and like national elections too. Like,
Yeah.
Don't be involved in this just because you think it's a trend. It's not a trend. It's a real life matter. It's an ongoing life matter. So you should continue to devote your attention and effort to it as much as you can.
Yeah.
Start with
don't let this.
Your parents. If you can prove
Fight
your
the good fight.
Asian parents wrong, you can fight anyone.
I'll give you $2 on the spot. And like, if you're able to, like, definitely get out of your comfort zone. Like, I think everyone talking to their parents is definitely out of their comfort zone. And like, it's okay to be like vulnerable in these situations, and it's okay to feel like you're ignorant. Like, be willing to learn, be like open-minded in like
Right.
information that you have. And when you do learn, it's also okay to change your mind on something too. Like, don't be afraid to.
Yeah. And even if, you know, like things return to normal, whatever, you know, you can also like support Black business, or, you know, support Black artists, and like find ways where you can like amplify like their voices, because, you know, there's a lot of like really cool stuff out there for you to like check out, even if it doesn't directly have to do with like the Black Lives Matter movement. Is just like supporting each other. So that wraps up this episode of the Talk is Deep podcast.
Thank you for listening on our first remote episode.
Yeah.
Hope everyone
And our
stays
only
safe.
remote episode. It's never going to happen again. This is because
Right.
the world's opening up.
Fighting the good. keep fighting the good fight, guys. Thank you for listening.
Yay.
Subscribe, like, share, sign petitions, donate.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.